Imagine returning home, expecting your family to be safe and sound, only to find everything completely burned to the ground. For Harish Kumar, this nightmare became his tragic reality. He came home to utter devastation. The house he'd built with his own hard work was now nothing but ashes. And even worse, his loved ones were gone, taken from him in the most brutal way imaginable. But the pain didn't stop there. Harish had a gut feeling about who was behind this unimaginable act. And now, it all comes down to us asking the same question. Why? Today we're diving deep into every chilling detail of this case, piecing together the clues to uncover the dark truth behind the motive. Because when someone murders an entire family, ties them up, beats them, and sets them on fire without any clear reason, well, you're dealing with a psychopath, plain and simple. To start with, Harish Kumar was the kind of guy who always put in the work. He wasn't one to sit around waiting for things to happen because, obviously, he made things happen. Back in the late 1970s, Harish decided to take a huge leap. He packed up his family and moved them to the United States, chasing the dream of a better life. His wife, Geeta Kumar, was no stranger to hard work either. If anything, she matched him step for step. They balanced each other out perfectly. Harish had the vision and drive, while Geeta had the steady, practical mindset that kept everything grounded. But of course, they didn't have it easy. Like any immigrant family, they faced their fair share of struggles, such as long hours, sacrifices, and tough decisions. But through it all, they refused to let anything stop them. Before we move on, I wanted to take some time to talk about this video's sponsor, Aura, which has become a really big deal lately because hackers may have just stolen the social security numbers of every American. You may not have heard, but over 2.9 billion records were stolen from national public data, which provides personal information to employers and others doing background checks. And these records don't just include surface-level information either, like I had originally assumed when I first heard about this, but instead they include information like a person's full name, address, date of birth, phone number, and most importantly, their social security number. And different members of hacker groups around the internet have reportedly released this information for completely free online. This is an extreme breach of privacy. And hearing about this, I'm honestly surprised it didn't make as much news as it did. Thankfully, I don't have to worry about breaches like this because I use Aura. Aura is constantly monitoring your personal data, including your social security number, across billions of data points like the dark web and public court records to detect and alert you to potential identity theft. They even give you up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst-case scenario happen. I also get things like transaction monitoring, a VPN, antivirus, a password manager, and a lot more. I get this all in one app at one affordable price. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to, either, you can go to aura.com/into-the-deep. Their relentless hard work started to pay off when, in the 1990s, they took another big step forward and bought a rundown hotel in the Studio City area. Ever since then, Harish and Geeta put their hearts into renovating the property, turning it into a shiny new hotel. They worked day and night, making sure every detail was perfect, and it didn't take long before they started seeing the rewards of their hard work. The Kumars soon expanded their success, developing a whole chain of hotels. Life seemed picture-perfect for them. In fact, they had it all: a thriving business, a loving home, and two wonderful kids, Paris, their 18-year-old son, and Tulsi, their 16-year-old daughter. They were enjoying the fruits of their labor, feeling like they had finally reached the peak of what they'd worked so hard for. At that time, Harish's mother-in-law, Sitaban Patel, who was 63, also lived with them. And according to some, she was the backbone of the family, making sure the kids were well taken care of while Harish and Geeta focused on running the business. Sitaban was there to ensure everything ran smoothly at home, giving the couple the freedom to grow their business without worrying about their children. But here's the thing: if you're a business owner, you know you're never truly alone. There are always rivals, competitors ready to outdo you, challenge you, or even try to bring you down. And Harish and Geeta were no exception. This is where Victor Govind enters the story. Just like Harish and Geeta, Victor was also a business owner, running a small, rundown hotel right next to the one the Kumar family had worked so hard to build. The two hotels were in the same area of Los Angeles, and believe it or not, their dispute started over something that seemed pretty minor: a back alley. Victor had blocked off the alley to expand his property, but Geeta needed that same alley to run her business properly. Naturally, tensions rose, and before long, the Department of City Planning got involved to try to sort things out. But according to Harish, it wasn't anything serious at first. It seemed like a simple problem about a back alley, something that could easily be resolved. He never expected it to lead to what was about to come next. By the way, I post true crime and new cases here every day, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing. It helps a lot. On May 4th, 2002, that's when Harish Kumar decided to step outside of his home to take a breather. That evening, everything seemed like any other normal day. Harish had been working hard, as usual, and decided to take a break by going out to play volleyball with his friends. He walked out of the house with no worries, thinking that his family was safe and sound inside. His wife, Geeta, was home, along with his mother-in-law, Sitaben, and their two kids, Paras and Tulsi. By just after 11 p.m., Harish returned home from his game, ready to relax and get some rest. As he pulled into the driveway, he was struck by an unimaginable sight. His home, the place where he had built so many memories with his family, was on fire. Without a second thought, Harish rushed toward the front door, instinctively trying to get inside to rescue his loved ones. But the heat was unbearable. The thick smoke and intense flames blocked his every move. It was impossible to get through. His heart raced as panic set in, knowing that the people he loved most were inside, and there was nothing he could do to save them. So, Harish quickly pulled out his phone and dialed 911, desperately reporting the fire. And within moments, the fire department arrived at the single-family residence in Hollywood Hills, Los Angeles. But the heartbreaking truth was more than Harish could bear. After the flames were finally controlled and the smoke began to clear, detectives made a chilling discovery. This wasn't just a tragic accident. It had been set intentionally. As if the devastation of losing his home wasn't enough, Harish's world was turned upside down when authorities revealed the most horrifying detail of all. His family had been killed before the fire was even set. According to official reports, his family was found in one single room, and their bodies were burned beyond recognition. The charred remains were unmistakably those of his wife, Geeta, their son, Paras, their daughter, Tulsi, and Harish's mother-in-law, Sitaben Patel. The scene inside that room was one that would haunt anyone who laid eyes on it. According to investigators, all four victims had been hog-tied, their hands and feet bound tightly together with cords, and their mouths sealed with duct tape. This method of restraint was a glaring sign that something far more sinister had occurred. As Detective Pietrantoni noted, that is an obvious indication that foul play was involved. The victims had clearly suffered before their lives were taken. Jay Moberly, a former LAPD homicide detective, described the gruesome scene, saying they had obviously endured immense heat. He recalled how one of the bodies had a leg burned off up to the knee, further evidence of the severe, relentless heat that had consumed them. Initially, Harish was the first one to come under suspicion. After all, it seemed strange that he wasn't at home when his entire family was there, especially at night. The investigators wondered, how could he have not been around when all this happened? However, Harish quickly provided a solid alibi. He had been playing volleyball with his friends at the time, which was verified by others. He wasn't at the scene when the tragedy unfolded. But there was one thing Harish mentioned during his questioning that really stuck with the detectives. He brought up their ongoing dispute with Victor Govind, the same man we mentioned earlier, who had clashed with Geeta over a back alley. As the investigation progressed, new clues began to emerge. Surveillance footage from a nearby house showed that a gray truck had been spotted in the area before and after the fire had started. This piece of evidence raised a lot of questions. What was this truck doing near the scene of the crime? Even more concerning was the fact that when police looked closer, they realized the truck had no license plate. The police immediately began trying to track down the unmarked vehicle, hoping it would lead them to the culprit. But in the meantime, they continued to piece together evidence at the crime scene. As part of their investigation, detectives walked through the house with Harish, knowing he could provide any further insights. When they reached the room where his family had been found, Harish pointed out that some things were missing. Most notably, his wife's case of jewelry, which had contained valuable pieces, and around $5,000 in cash were gone. But despite the missing valuables, investigators were quick to dismiss the idea that this was a simple robbery gone wrong. The crime scene told a much darker story, one filled with hatred and malice. As the investigation deepened, the autopsies revealed even more disturbing details that sent chills down everyone's spine. The victims had been burned alive, something that was confirmed by the smoke found in their lungs. But the horror didn't stop there. Geeta and Tulsi, the mother and daughter, both had injuries to their throats. And just when it seemed like the case couldn't get any more twisted, a new lead came to light. Rod Burnson, a former LAPD sergeant and crime reporter for Fox 11, reached out to detectives with some shocking information. He had received a call from an anonymous tipster who claimed to know who was behind the gruesome quadruple murder and the arson. Burnson managed to convince the tipster, named Angelberto Novoa, to meet with investigators and provide more details. Angel revealed that, 6 weeks before the murders, he had been approached by someone to intimidate a few people into signing some contracts. Angel didn't know all the details, but he knew that he would be working with two men, one named Pedro, who drove a gray truck, and another named Freddy. As the investigators listened carefully, they learned that the targets of this scheme had been the Kumars. But things didn't go as planned, and whatever arrangement or deal they had with the Kumars fell apart. The plot thickened when Angel identified one of the men, Freddy, as Victor Govin, the very business rival Harish had mentioned earlier. But the twists kept coming. Detective work led them to another man named Carlos Amador, who had a gray pickup truck registered in his name. The investigators dug into Amador's history and uncovered some unsettling details. He had a record of minor offenses, but what really stood out was that some of those offenses had been committed alongside none other than Peter Govin, Victor's brother. This was the link that investigators needed to connect the dots. Victor Govin, his brother, and their associates were now the primary suspects in what seemed like a carefully orchestrated act of vengeance. Now Peter Govin's criminal record added another layer of intrigue to the investigation. 7 years earlier, he had been convicted for assault with a firearm, yet somehow he had received less than 2 years in jail for the crime. The leniency of his sentence didn't sit well with investigators, who now saw Peter's violent tendencies as part of a bigger pattern. But it was the Govins' business ambitions that truly caught their attention. The Govins had massive expansion plans tied to the disputed alleyway. If they won the rights to it, it would have meant millions of dollars for their business. According to Moberly, this alley was more than just a small plot of land. It was a key to the future of the Govins' empire. And it seemed like the Kumars were standing in their way. But what really fueled the anger between the two families wasn't just about business. It was about who was in charge. Investigators discovered that the Govins were enraged by the fact that Harish Kumar had deferred to his wife, Geeta, during their discussions about the alley. We determined that both Victor and his brother were incensed by the fact that they had to talk to Geeta, said Pietrantoni. This simple act of respect, of allowing Geeta to handle negotiations, seemed to have sparked the bitter hatred between the families. The timing of the dispute was also crucial. A hearing was scheduled for May 10th, just 6 days after the murders. to decide the fate of the alleyway. Would the Kumars or the Govins win? According to Fatal Family Feuds, the outcome would have been pivotal. Investigators spoke with city planners who confirmed that Gita would likely have been granted full access to the alley, and Victor Govin would have been forced to remove any illegal structures he had set up there. This potential loss, combined with the growing animosity, could have been the final straw for the Govins. In their pursuit of justice, investigators turned to a more covert approach. They tapped the phones of Victor and Peter Govin, as well as their associate Amador. Pretending to be auto theft detectives, they managed to speak with Amador and get the VIN number of his truck, the same truck that had been seen in the area around the time of the fire. Around this time, another tipster came forward with crucial information. The witness revealed that Amador had confessed to them about a meeting with two of his Indian friends at a house, claiming they had gone there to get some documents signed. But according to Amador, things got out of hand. The tipster said that Amador mentioned seeing someone's face, and then, in a chilling turn of events, one of the Govin brothers had ordered that everyone in the house be killed and the house set on fire to cover up the crime. This bombshell revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation, but the breakthroughs didn't stop there. The police tracked down a third witness, another individual who admitted that he'd been asked by Amador to act as an alibi. It seemed that Amador was deeply entangled in the Govins' plot and now had no choice but to cooperate with the authorities. Eventually, Amador was apprehended by the LAPD. After being interrogated, he agreed to testify against the Govin brothers, painting a terrifying picture of the events leading up to the brutal murders. According to Amador, he had been there when the Kumar family was ambushed. He described how the victims were tied up, beaten, and brutally threatened before Victor Govin, who Amador referred to as Virendra, ordered that they be killed. The killers then doused the entire house with flammable liquid, setting it ablaze to ensure that no evidence would remain. By late July, investigators had reason to believe that the Govins, aware that Amador had been in contact with the authorities, might be planning to kill their co-conspirator. This added an even darker layer to the case. Not only had they orchestrated the brutal murder of the Kumar family, but they might also be willing to eliminate anyone who could potentially turn on them. After 4 intense weeks of deliberations, the jury finally reached a verdict for Victor Govin, but they couldn't agree on his brother, Peter. The jury foreperson shared that 9 jurors were ready to acquit Peter, while 3 jurors believed he should be convicted. With this split, Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge Kathleen Kennedy Powell declared a mistrial in Peter's case, meaning they would have to start over with a new trial for him. As the court read the verdict for Victor, he remained eerily calm. His eyes stayed downcast, showing no emotion. It was like he wasn't fazed by the gravity of what was happening. Meanwhile, Harish, who had lost his entire family in such a brutal way, was utterly devastated. He was heartbroken beyond words, but still found the strength to speak out about how he never could have imagined Victor could do something so cruel. His voice shook as he said, "Victor was my neighbor, and we were really close. I never thought he would have such a vicious mind to do such a thing." During the same court session, Amador stepped forward and shared what he had seen that night. He told the court in detail how he watched Victor Govin strangle the Kumar family members while Peter Govin joined in the violent attack. But not everyone was buying into Amador's story. The defense team worked hard to undermine his credibility, calling him a liar and even suggesting that he might have been the one who masterminded the whole thing. Victor Govin's lawyer, Richard Steingard, tried to argue that there was no real business dispute between the families and insisted there was no concrete evidence connecting Victor to the crime beyond Amador's testimony. Meanwhile, Peter Govin's attorney, John E. Sweeney, focused on the lack of solid evidence to convict Peter, other than what Amador had said. Sweeney went as far as calling Amador a disgusting, pathetic psychopath, trying to paint him as untrustworthy. But then again, that's what defense attorneys are there for, to stand by the suspect. After 2 years of courtroom drama, Victor Govan was convicted and sentenced to death just before Christmas in 2004. Amador, on the other hand, pleaded guilty to 4 counts of second-degree murder back in 2003, receiving a life sentence. Fast forward on April 4, 2005, and the jury found Peter Govan guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder, confirming that he'd committed the crimes for financial gain during a robbery and burglary and in a brutal multiple murder spree. Just like his brother, Peter was sentenced to death. Tragically, Harish Kumar passed away just a few months after the trial wrapped up. Some say he may have followed his family in spirit, finally at peace, knowing those responsible were brought to justice. But again, we're not done yet. While on death row, Victor Govan, 51, was found in his cell at 10:15 p.m. in 2018 and was pronounced dead at 10:30 p.m. His death occurred 2 days after Orange County serial killer Andrew Urdiales, 54, was also found dead in his cell. It's a chilling pattern that more death row inmates seem to die by their own hands than by execution. So, if you're curious about the case of Andrew Urdiales, let us know in the comments, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on the Kumar massacre too. Do you think Amador deserved a life sentence instead of the death penalty? And do you think the brothers are truly psychopaths for such a simple reason? Share your thoughts below. If you like the way we create these videos and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you once again for watching.